Hilchas Sanhedrin v'einshna mesurim lahem Perek Shishi. Here the Rambam discusses the dinim of a dayan that made a mistake. Now when a dayan makes a mistake, first of all, there could be a difference what kind of mistake it is. Was it a mistake that's called a te'eh b'dvar mishnah, which means he forgot a beferish mishnah, or beferish gemara, or as the Ramah adds, something that says in the poskim, that were in the spasha that futzes Yisrael, and he just wasn't aware of it. That's called a te'eh b'dvar mishnah. And then there's a te'eh b'shikol hadas, which means, let's say, the Rambam says that there was machlekes, and it's not a furish who the halach is like, and he wasn't aware that it was nispashet that the halach is like one of them, and he passed on like the other one. So that's one issue. What was the mistake? Was it a mistake b'shikol hadas, or was it a mistake b'dvar mishnah? Then there's another issue. What kind of dayan is he? There could be a metzias of a dayan, which say he's a mumcha, and say he has reshus either from the reish golus, the reish golusa, or from the bali dinim. And then you can have metzias of a dayan, which doesn't have both factors. Either he's a mumcha and he doesn't have rishus, or he has rishus and he's not a mumcha. That's a second factor. And then a third factor would be also whether the dayan, when he paskined and he caused harm to happen, was he a nosav and nosan biyad? Did he actually go ahead and take the item from one and give it to the other, shalekadin? Or he just paskined, and as a result of that, something happened which was shalekadin. But he wasn't nosav and nosan biyad. So these are the three factors that could be in this din. Perek Shishi. Kol dayan shadon dini momenus. V'to im toa b'dvarim hagluyim hayiduyim kigein dinam ha-mufurashim b'mishnah b'talmud. So then it's poshut that it's chayzer adin. If a person was a te'eh b'dvar mishnah, it's poshut that it's chayzer adin. And umachzirin hadover kishahoya mikoidim v'donim beikaloch. And you have to bring things back as they were, and as if there was never a psak din. And donim beikaloch. And the miyav shalachzer. If there's no way of bringing back it the way it was, kigein shaholach zeh shenot l'amom shleikidin l'medinas hayam. He passed in the Reuven owes Shimon money, and he gave Shimon the money, and now Shimon went away. He's medinas hayam. Esha ya'alim, or Shimon is an alim, a strong person, and you can't take it out of him. She wasn't a dinter between two people. Shetime davar ator. He passed in that truma was tamei, and they went ahead and burned it. Esha heide b'ksheira shehi treifa. He passed in that a treifa is ksheira v'hechilu l'klovim ukiyetz b'zeh. So in all these cases, harezeh potim l'shal. And afal pi shegorim lehezik is leinis chavan lehezik. Even though lepeli was gerim lehezik, but since he was leinis chavan lehezik, so he's potter. So that's this din. This din is nachamal. A person was a Torah b'dvar mishnah, so it's pashut that the din is no longer a din. It's not a real din because it was a Torah b'dvar mishnah. And on the other end, he's potter because since he was leinis chavan lehazik, and he was a mistake. So even though he was gerim lehazik, leinis chavan lehazik, so he's potter. Remember the Mefarshim asked that L'chura Adam Muad Leilam. He was Geirim Lahazik. He was Geirim Lahazik. Einoch Hanami, it wasn't Kavana, but he was Geirim Lahazik. So why should the fact that Leinas Chamal Lahazik be a factor that he should be potter? But I'll call upon him, that's clearly the din. By a Torah B'dvar Mishnah, so he is potter. In other words, you try to bring the din back, but Lepel, if you can't bring the din back, he's potter. Halacha base. Now, if he was Torah B'shikol Hadas, he was a Torah not B'dvar Mishnah B'shikol Hadas, כגן דובר שהוא מחלקת תנועים המירואים ולנפסק ההלכה כאחד מהם בפרש ולפעל ועושה כאחד מהם וליודע שכבר פושט המייסה בכל האלם כדברי האחר. So he passed like one of them, not knowing that it was already poshat haminig, that the halacha is like the other. So he made a mistake b'shikol hadas. So here it depends whether he was a person that had sai being a mumcha and sai he had rishus, or he only had one of them. Did he have both of them? Sai he was a mumcha and sai had rishus, or he only had one of them. So as im hoye zeh hadayin mumcha, v'notel rishus merish golus. He sai was a mumcha and the sai was a notel rishus merish golus. Sheli hoye netel rishus. He didn't get rishus merish golus. Avul kibul eisam bali adinim aleim. Is hail v'hu mumcha. Is sai a mumcha and his sai has rishus. So the first thing is choyzer adin. The din and ours was a mistake. So since it was a mistake, it was choyzer adin. The imiyav shalav ziri potel l'mashal. So in other words, in the imiyav shalav ziri, he's potel l'mashal. Echad anetel rishus merish golus, anetel rishus m'bezer shel Yisrael, beres Yisrael, avalei b'chutz lo es k'meshu b'yarnu. We learned before that if you have rishus from the reish golus, so you have rishus to paskin everywhere. Sai out of Eretz Yisrael, sai in Eretz Yisrael. If you have rishus from the reish bezin of Eretz Yisrael, so then you have rishus in Eretz Yisrael. You don't have rishus in chutz l'Eretz. So again, this din is basically, if Sai had rishus and Sai was a mumcha, so that his din is chayzer. That's first of all, his din is chayzer, and also he's potter. He's potter milishal. Now, in the first case, when it was a Torah Dvar Mishnah, doesn't say it has to have both factors. Even if he only had one of the factors, he was a mumcha and he didn't have rishus. He had rishus, but he wasn't a mumcha. Also, it's the same din, that the din is chayzer and lepel his potter milishalim. Over here, we're saying that over here, in a case where he was Torah b'shikol adas, so then if he has both factors, so then it's chayzer hadin, the din is chayzer, and also he's potter milishalim, which has to be explained why should there be a difference between Torah b'shikol adas and Torah b'dvar Mishnah. But we'll do this in Halacha Gimel. Now, Hoya Hateya Mumcha Bezin, V'lei Notul Rishus, and V'lei Kibul Al Eisei Balidinim. In other words, he had one mile, he was a Mumcha, but on the other end, he didn't have Rishus in the Rish Bezin, there was no Kabbalah Al Balidinim. Eishalei Hoya Mumcha, Avul Kibul Eisei Balidinim Aleim Lodlam Kidin. Over here, the Rambam can't give this a situation where he got Rishus from the Rish Galusa without being a Mumcha, because the rishus from Reish Galusa without being a mumcha is meaningless. So male over here, the situation of having rishus would only be kibul aleim balidinim. Now v'toah b'shikol adas. So we have a dayan which has one factor chodel l'tivus. So he's either a mumcha or they will makabel him. He has a right to paskin to impose his psak din. And lepel he made it toys b'shikol adas. So the Ram says, Im nosev v'nosim b'yad, if he was nosev v'nosim b'yad, is masha osa osui v'yishalem mebeisei. The din is not chayzer, because he was a toya b'shikol adas, and lepeil he has to pay. He was a nosev v'nosim b'yad. He made it a toys b'shikol adas, and he was a nosev v'nosim b'yad. So the din is not chayzer. So we leave the din as he paskent. Elamai v'yishalem mibasei. He has to pay for it. Because we don't have to try to get the din back. We say he should pay mibasei. However, v'im lei nosev v'nosim b'yad. So then is yachzer hadin. So then we try to bring back the din if it's possible. V'im yevshel lachzer is yishalem mibasei. And only if yevshel lachzer yishalem mibasei. So basically, the din is according to the Rambam that if he made a mistake b'shikol adas and lepel, he doesn't have both milas l'tivusa, so he always has to pay. If lepel, we can't get the din back. Again, if a person made a mistake in a Dvar Mishnah, so then he's potter. The din is always chayzer, and he's potter. If he made a mistake in shikol adas, so if he has side the fact that he's a mumcha, and side the fact that he has rishus, so then the din is always chayzer, and again he's potter. Masha'inkin, if he only has one factor, he has only one factor, which is that he's either a mumcha and he didn't have rishus, so he had rishus and he wasn't a mumcha, so then it depends. If he was nosev and nosim b'yad, so then the din is that we leave the din as it was. Masha'inkin, if he wasn't nosev and nosim b'yad, we try to get the din back as it was, but on the other end, if we can't, so then he has to pay. So basically, he has to pay regardless, because he was a Torah b'shikol adas, and he had only one factor. Being a Torah b'shikol adas and having only one factor, which is either a mumcha or a rishus, means that if he causes a loss, he has to pay for it. But on the other hand, do we try to bring back the din? So that'll change whether or not it was nasav and nasim b'yad. If it was nasav and nasim b'yad, so we don't try to change the psak din, and we say that even if it's reversible, we leave it as it is. And lepel, he pays me basei. Masha'en kain, if it is reversible, so we try to reverse it, and if we can't reverse it, then yishalem me basei. That's the Shittas Rambam. Now the Maisa is the Rif holds that b'chlal, when do we say that the din should remain, that the din should remain as it is? Normally, since he made a mistake, so we're trying to help the person that lost because of his mistake. We're trying to help the person that lost because of his mistake. So we want to bring the din back. But if he's anyways going to have to pay for it, the dayan, so memela we could leave the din as it is. Because the only reason we're trying to reverse the din is to help out the person that lost shalek din. But if the dayan is going to have to pay for it, so then there's no need to reverse the din. So according to the Shittas Serif is azay. If he was nasav and nasim b'yad, so then he's going to have to pay for it. And since he's going to have to pay for it, so therefore we leave the din as it is. Masha'en Kain, if he wasn't Nasiv Nasim Biyad, so then he won't have to pay for it. Then he will not have to pay for it. And therefore we try to reverse the din. So in other words, whether trying to reverse the din or not reverse the din depends whether he'd have to pay for it. If he would have to pay for it, so then we don't try to reverse the din by Toh B'Shikol Adas. And if he won't have to pay for it, so then we do try to reverse the din. So we'll say like this: in a case where he was tartali tevusa, so he's not going to have to pay for it. So then for sure we try to reverse the din. And if we can't reverse the din, so he doesn't have to pay for it. That would be the shitzas harif. Shitzas harif is that whenever you could not, in other words, whenever he's not going to pay for it, so you try to reverse the din. And since he's not going to pay for it, so you don't try to. So then, since he's going to pay for it, so you don't have to reverse the din. Masha'inka, the Rambam is not holding like that. The Rambam, that's the Achreinim HaMadaik. In Shitzas Haram, the Rambam is not like the Rif. Because the Rambam holds that in the case of Tov V'Shikol Adas, and he only has one Maila, so then he always has to pay for it. He always has to pay for it. Elamai, the difference is only if he was Nasav Nasim B'Yad, so then we don't try to reverse the din. Masha'inkin, if he wasn't Nasav Nasim B'Yad, so then we try to reverse the din. So it's a little bit hard to understand. Whereas according to the Rif, the Indian is Pasha. If he was Nasim B'Yad, so Memela, he's going to be responsible. And since he's going to be responsible, so therefore we're not trying to reverse it. Masha'inkin, in the case of Lei Nasim B'Yad, so he won't be responsible. So therefore we do try to reverse it because we don't want that the person loses money, Shalei Kedin. But according to the Rambam, either way he's going to have to pay, whether Nasim B'Yad or Lei Nasim B'Yad. Either way he has to pay. So why should the din be that if Nasim B'Yad, so then he pays and we don't reverse the din? And Lepel, if he was late Nasim B'Yad, then we do try to reverse the din. What's the seichel of it? So the Pashas Hapshara is because Lepel, since he was Nasim B'Yad, so he's more responsible. In other words, he made a mistake. He was a Toya B'Shikol Adas, he made a mistake. And that's an Avla. And Vice Tuis, the Mishnah says, that the Avla of making a mistake in Shikol Adas is a bigger Avla than the Avla of being a Toya B'Dvar Mishnah. And that is because a Toya B'Dvar Mishnah is the Pshat is that he wasn't aware of this halacha. He wasn't aware of this halacha. So I mean, he should have been aware, but Lepel, he wasn't aware of this halacha. So therefore, that's not really considered a proper Avla. And therefore, he's not responsible. Leis chavan lahazik. Masha'inkin, a person, he knows about the halacha, and then he decides that the halacha is like one. So he should have realized that he's not a bar hachi to have his own shikol adas. If he was a tov shikol adas, he should have realized that he's not a bar hachi to be to make the shikol adas. In other words, he should have found out what the halacha is, and therefore the avla of being toya b'shikol adas is a bigger avla than the b'teya b'dvar mishnah. That's on number one. So the Rambam is saying like this: this person was a Te'eh B'Shikol Adas, and Sudar Tzu, he was also a Nasav Nasim B'Yad, so therefore he pays for it. And therefore you don't want to reverse the din. You leave the din as it is, because Lepel, there is a mokum for this din, there is such a deya, and let him pay for it, because he was Sai Te'eh B'Shikol Adas, and Sai was Nasav Nasim B'Yad. Masha'inkin, in a case where he wasn't Nasav Nasim B'Yad, so Einochinami, if Lepel, it's irreversible the din, so then he has to pay for it. But on the other hand, if it's reversible, so then we say let's reverse the din and Mamela, he won't have to pay. Masha'inkin, if it's irreversible, so then he has to pay for it. So according to the Rambam, basically the Yisod HaDin is that if he was a Toya B'Shikol Adas and Lepel, he only had one factor L'Tevusa, so then he's always Chayv, regardless. Elamai, the difference would only be if Nasav and Nasim B'Yad or not, whether or not we try to reverse the din, and only if it's irreversible does he have to pay. And that's in the case where Lei Nasim B'Yad. Masha'inkin of Nasim B'Yad, we don't try to reverse the din. That's according to the Rambam. Masha'inkin, according to the Rif, the difference of Nasim and Nasim B'Yad is not whether or not we're going to reverse the din. In other words, whether we reverse the din depends on whether he's responsible to pay. So by Nasim and Nasim B'Yad, over there he's responsible to pay. And therefore, we don't reverse the din. Masha'inkin, by Lei Nasim and Nasim B'Yad, he won't be responsible to pay. And therefore, since by Lei Nasim B'Yad, he won't be responsible to pay. So therefore, we try to reverse the din. If you can't reverse the din, you can't reverse the din. But then you try to reverse the din. So it's like a basic machlekes between the Rif and the Rambam in the Havana of why should there be a difference of Nasim B'Yad. And obviously there's also another machlekes, whether or not he's responsible if Lei Nasim B'Yad. And that's also negaya to earlier in Halacha Beis where the Rambam said that if he was kibleis balidinim hail v'hu mumche choizer adin. Now these words hail v'hu mumche choizer adin, l'chura, what's the havan of this din? In other words, according to the Rif, the pshat is since he's a mumche and he has rishus, so memela, so therefore choizer adin, mashaykin the choizer adin because since he's not going to have to pay for it. So therefore, it's Chayzer Din. But according to the Rambam, that's not really the factor. The factor is not whether he's going to have to pay for it to decide whether Chayzer Adin. So mainly those words are a little bit shver in the Rambam. What's the pshat in those words in Halacha Beis? But I'll call upon the Halacha is clear to us. Let's say over the Halacha again. That in a case where he's a Torah B'dvar Mishnah, so then it's always Chayzer Adin, and it's always that he's not responsible. As long as we're dealing with someone that's a dayan, either he's a dayan, he didn't get rishus, or he had rishus and he wasn't a dayan, a mumcha, but al kopan, he was a dayan, a Torah B'dvar Mishnah, it's chayzer adin, and there's nothing to talk about. If he was a toya in shikol adas, so if he was a dayan in the sense that he had both milas, so again it's always chayzer adin, and always he's potter. Masha'en came if he only had one milah, he was a Torah b'shikol adas and only had one milah. So then it depends. If he was nosiv and nosim b'yad, so then in such a case, according to the Rambam, he always has to pay. If he made a mistake, it's irreversible, he has to pay. However, do we try to make it reversible? So that depends. If he was nosiv and nosim b'yad, we don't try to reverse it. And Mamela, we just tell him to pay. Masha'inkin, if he wasn't nosiv and nosim b'yad, so then we do try to reverse it. And if we can't reverse it, only then does he pay. Halacha Dalet. Aval, that's talking about Alts that he's one. He's either mumche and he doesn't have rishus, or he has rishus and he's not a mumche. Masha'inkin aval misha ain't a mumche, and also will he kibul oisi balidinin. Is aval pisha not all rishus, even if he got rishus from the reish galusa, this means nothing. Hareze bechlal bal izreya, and ve'ene bechlal adayon, and he doesn't go into bechlal dayon. Lefichach ein din of din. His din is bechlal not a din. Bein loita, whether he made a mistake or didn't make a mistake, his psak din is meaningless. And v'chol balid mi balid echad mi balidinim imrotza cheze v'dom b'fnei beznik. You go say, I want to redo the din Torah, even though he doesn't have any specific thing that he has tinus to what he said. But on the other hand, he says what this person said is meaningless because he's not a mumche. He will lay kiblo leim baldinim memela. What he said is meaningless. Now v'im to v'nosan biyad. Now this person that's not a mumche, and he was a to v'nosan biyad. So the din is chayiv l'shalim mibeisei. He has to first of all pay to the person that lost the money. He has to. You don't go to the person that took the money shaleik din and you say try. He was mechayiv Reuven to pay Shimon. So the first thing you go is to Shimon, ask Shimon to give back Reuven the money, and then if Shimon doesn't want to give back Reuven the money, then you have to give back the Reuven the money. The din over here, since he was a person that really had no right to paskin din Torah, so if he paskin that Reuven should give Shimon the money, shaleik din, so then the din is that he has to pay Reuven. So then it's chayav l'shalom mibesi. The first thing he has to be m'shalom mibesi, and then the chayzev l'kech mibal din zeh shenosim l'shalik halacha, and then he goes ahead. Then he goes to Shimon because he told Reuven he should pay Shimon. So the first thing he has to go and pay Reuven if he took the money from Reuven, and now he has to try to get the money out of Shimon. If Lepel, he has no way of being Mazir. So then is Yishalim, Kidin Kol Gerim Lahazik. Now these words are Lechura, like repeating what he said before. So the Kesef Mishnah is saying that these words over here have to be Geiris, that it depends if he was Nasiv and Nasim B'yad or not. If he was Nasiv and Nasim B'yad, so then he has to go ahead and pay back the person that he took the money from, and then go ahead and try to get the money from the person he gave the money to. Mashenkin, if he wasn't Nosiv and Nasim B'yad, so then he has to go ahead and ask the person that he gave the money to give it back. And however, if that person doesn't have lahauser, in other words, the person that he gave the money to doesn't have the money to pay back, so then Yishalom Kidin Kol Gerim Lahazik. Again, if he was a Nasiv and Nasim B'yad, so then the first thing he has to pay to the person he took it from. And then he has to worry about trying to get the money back from the other person. Mashenkin, if he wasn't a Nasim and Nasim B'yad, so then he has to try to get the money out of the other person that he was given the money shaleikadin. And if he can't get that money out, or there was no other person, it was just a hefsid, like it was Matami Sator, or he said that it's treif or something that's really kosher, so then he has to pay. Then Yishalom Kedin Kol Gerim Lahazik. Shezem Mischavan Lahazik. Well, this person is called a Mischavan Lahazik. He's a person that has no right to paskin, and Leper he paskin, and he costs a hazik. So Mela, since he has no right to paskin, so therefore he has to pay for it. Halacha Hey. Dayan Sheto V'chiyev Shvua L'misha Ein Chaybo. He said he paskin that a certain person is chayiv shvua, and because that person didn't want to swear, so therefore v'asa zeb pshara in baldinei kedei shelo yishava, because he didn't want to swear, so he was willing to make some type of a pshara with the baldin. V'acher kach yoda she'eni ben shvua, and then was nizgala that the dayan made a mistake and he wasn't a ben shvua, and Memela, the whole deal that he made with that person was on a false assumption. Is afal pi shekonim miyodi ala pshara, even though there was a ma'aser kinyan on the pshara that he committed himself to, ain't a clue. The only reason why he was mekabel this pshara, this chiyuv, was only in order to become part of the shvua. And v'chol kinyan b'tois is chayz v'chein kol kiyes b'zeh. Now, since he made a ma'aser kinyan, assuming something that he's chayav a shvua, and therefore he wants to become part of him the shvua, so that ma'aser kinyan is not binding. Halacha vav. Shnayim shenis atzmo b'din. Two people are arguing about a certain din teira, but echodeimer nidin kan. Let's go to one place to be done. V'echodeimer no. Naila lebez nagodl. I want to go to the bez nagodl. Why? Because Shem yitu eila dayonim vitziu mamash lekedin. They're having a din teira amongst themselves, and now the question is, to who should you go to a dayan? So one of them says, let's go to the dayan, to the local dayan. And he's saying, no, let's go to the Bez Nagodl, because Shema Yitu Eila Dayon, V'yitziu Mamash Lekedin. So the din is Koifanois V'don Be'iri. In other words, we force this other person, which is tiny, he wants to go to Bez Nagodl, we say no. That Lepel over here is the Dayan, so Mele, that person has a right. We have a sichzuk between ourselves, so that person has the right to insist that we go to the Dayan in our city. Omar, if this person that is not happy with the Dayan in the city says, Kisvu Utnuli, Me'ezitam don tuni. I want you to write down based on what you saw you gave your psak din, because Shema Te'isem, and he wants to show it to people that are maybe bigger mumchen, is kois v'noiseli. So first they have to write him, the tam for din teira. V'acharkach mitziyim iman hikatayna. I don't want to pay until you give me a ksav of why you paskin. In other words, you're saying I owe this person money. I want to know why you say that I owe this person money. And only then will I pay the money. If Moshe, the Dayan of the city, would need to ask something for the Bez Nagodl Yerushalayim, is Kesem v'Shelchem v'Shelim v'Donu Lehem Be'iran. And Lepel, then when they get the answer back from the Bez Nagodl Yerushalayim, then they're done Be'iram. Kifi Mashiach V'Ksav Bez Nagodl. So there's a musik of a person saying, listen, this is the Dayan himself of the city saying, I'm not sure about the Psak Din. I'm going to go and ask the Bez Nagodl, and based on that, I'll paskin on what the Bez Nagodl says. So, B'kitzur, the first thing is we're saying that if there's two people have a sichsuk, and one of them says that I want to go to the Bez Nagodl, and the other one says no, I want to go to the Dayanim Shebe'iri, so you could insist that he go to the Dayanim Shebe'iri. But on the other hand, the Bali Dinim could insist to ask from the Dayanim that he wants to have, and you're telling me I owe this person money, I want to have a ksav to tell Mehechan Danturi. Because maybe you made a mistake, and I want to be able to show it to someone, and maybe prove that you made a mistake. So I'll call upon them. They have to write the yisod of what they paskin. Now, b'medvar mamurin that we say that you can't force the other baldin to go to the Bez Nagodl, that's b'shara dinim. Two people, shezetein v'zetein. There's two people that are having a dinteira amongst themselves, a certain sichsuch about something. They would shoot from or whatever. Ein b'sha'amar hamalva nidin kan v'aleva eman neilech leBez Nagodl. The malva wants to have the dinteira here, and the Levi says, no, you're money for me money, I want to go to the Bez Nagodl. If the malva is the one that's tining that he wants to go to Bez Nagodl, so then then we do force the Levi to go with the malva to Bez Nagodl, because Shenema, based on the pasuk, Eved Leiva Lishmalva, and that din is not only by a Leiva and a malva, v'chein im toin zeh sheizike a gozlei. So in other words, he owes him money because either he was mazik him or he stole from him. And v'rotza hatein lales, and the person that's the tiveya wants to go to Bez Nagodl is koifun bezn shebeiri is hanitin lales imei v'chein kol kiyetz v'zeh. So in other words, if the person is toyin that he owes him money, and there's a yisod to the Tanya, like we'll soon learn. So then we can insist that this gazlan or this mazik or this loiva should come to the Beis Din HaGadol. Mamed var amorim b'shahayu sham edim eiraya lenigzil elenizik elemalva. In other words, the malva has a raya that he was a malva. The question is, did the loiva pay? Didn't he pay? Or the nigzil has a raya that this person was a gazlan, and the nizik has a raya that this person was a mazik. The shaila is how much or whatever the tainas are. Aval tainer ikon is tamazay. He's telling you, I'm your malva. He's telling you, you're not a malva. He's telling you, you're my mazik. And he's saying he's not a mazik. Is aim mechayv and sanit lots is klal alenishba came with nifter if he has a tain against it. So all really involves is shvos hesses for him to be kaifer shvos hesses. So that shvos hesses could be done in the bezin should be iri. Now this din was speaking about that one of them is insisting that the other one comes lebezin hagodl. So we're saying the malva could insist that the lever should come to bezin hagodl if there's a fact that he's a malva and he's a lever. Now there is the nizik could insist that the mazik comes to the bezin hagodl. And al derech zeh, the nigzel could insist that the gazlan comes to Beis Din HaGadol. V'chein adin b'zman hazeh she'ein sham Beis Din HaGadol, aval yesh mikei misheyesh b'hem chachamim g'dei mumchim l'rabim. There are places where they have more bati dinim, which are greater mumchis, bigger mumchim. Umikei misheyesh b'hem talmidim she'einam kamesim. There are places where the dayanim are also dayanim, but they're not in the same level of mumchis like other places. Amar Hamal v'neilech l'mokum pleini shebe'artzei lefnei pleini hagodol v'nidin lefanu b'din zeh is shekeifen is haleva v'heilechimei v'kacho yomaisim b'svaret b'chol yem, that they would insist that to go to a different city, to a place where there's mumchim gedelim in order to have the dintera. So again, the malva has a right to insist that the leva comes with him to a more authoritative bezdin, even though it means going out to a different city.